This is the Miller philosopher. Was Ulmo involved in the affairs of Middle-earth during the Third Age? Ulmo is the one Vala who never fully turned his back on Middle-earth. So why does he then vanish after the First Age? No appearances, no messages, not even a whisper of his name, not even a hint of him that's officially documented as being him in the Third Age. Without getting too deep in the weeds, of all the Valar, Ulmo was the one who was the most active historically. He is also the one who comes as close as any Vala can to being a rebel without outright crossing that line, unlike Morgoth, who basically was a flat-out rebel. Ulmo believes in the plans of Uru for the higher races to aid the younger races throughout the history of the world. Whether that was the Valar themselves or even the elves, their mission, their life's purpose, was to nurture those younger races, humanity, the dwarves even probably, and to take their place in the world. And the ongoing wars with Morgoth made that mission especially critical. It was Ulmo who chose to take up residence in the outer seas of the world rather than reside in Valinor like the rest of his kin. It was Ulmo who led the faction of the Vala that voted against bringing the elves to Valinor in the first place. It was Ulmo who maintained active watch during the Noldor exile, bending the rules of the ban as much as he could to help the people of northwestern Middle-earth against Morgoth, inspiring Finarfin and Turgon to build the realms of Nargothrond and Gondolin. And his presence in Beleriand's waters was so strong that Morgoth's forces avoided them whenever possible. Ulmo was the Vala who stayed. But after that, it's almost like he goes dark. The most active Vala in Middle-earth's history gets nothing. I mean, at least Osei and Union get name drops when it comes to Numenor, and by the time the Third Age rolls around, the only divine connections running around the world at that time are Sauron, the Astari, and whatever other lesser spirits are just lying low. So where's Ulmo? Well, when I looked into it, I found no direct quotes from Tolkien regarding the Valar state. Supposedly, the Valar, along with Valinor, were presumed to have been removed from the dimension of Middle-earth. However, this doesn't seem to line up with Ulmo's proven character. Again, Tolkien never gives a direct answer, but I think he leaves hints. The closest potential reference was that during the Nazgul's pursuit of Frodo to Rivendell, they found water very difficult to cross, and that during Boromir's final send-off over the waterfalls after his death, that his boat seemed to be illuminated somehow for some unknown reason. No other details are given nor hinted at. In the Second and Third Ages, Sauron also never approaches the western shore, not once. And given his history with Ulmo and the fact that Ulmo was one of the three most powerful Ainur in Middle-earth at that time, the absence is very suspicious. These aren't proofs, these are just patterns. There are other factors involved as well, though. One being that the Valar are forbidden from directly influencing or forcing the children of the Yuvatar into anything. This, I think, was Ulmo's main reason for resisting the summons of the elves in the first place. While he does give visions, he never forced them upon the dreamer to follow them through. It's only after that person makes the choice that he becomes more engaging, with the exception of possibly Tuor. However, during the Second Age, Morgoth is gone, and Sauron is actually behaving for a little bit before returning to evil. And when he did return to evil, he was often deep inland or way in the Far East. There is no record of Sauron approaching the coast at all, as I said before. There's also the fact that Ulmo didn't like staying in Valinor and preferred to stay in the seas. And this brings up the question if Uru, when he removed Valinor from the rest of the world, also included that Ulmo be removed as well. Silmarillion does say that all the Valar laid down their authority before Uru went apocalyptic, so this would include Ulmo. But after all, Ulmo did bend the rules but never broke them, and this was an intervention by the Supreme Creator himself. there was certainly no defying him in any capacity whatsoever if he was deciding to assert his dominance and authority at that point in time over the Valar. But that being said, if Ulmo had a choice, he wasn't going to stay in the Holy West or wherever it was at that point in time. And since he was a Vala, different dimensions need not hold him back from returning to the world if he chose to or was allowed. So this then begs the question, if Ulmo had returned to the seas of the New World, why wasn't he intervening like he had in the First Age? This, I think, as well as this being suggested by other people, is that Ulmo's First Age activities were to assist against another divine force. And during the Third Age, there is no act of divine evil on the level of a Valar. And Sauron is basically operating undercover and deep inland anyway, away from the seas. So it's possible that as far as Ulmo knew, there was no equal or greater divine threat that needed that kind of assistance, and everything else was basically internal affairs from there on. Thus, he couldn't get involved. Because again, the Valar cannot force nor coerce other races against their will, even if their will happens to be evil. The closest events that could involve Ulmo were the Gondor-Umbar naval wars, because it was a naval war, and the death of Ardawi, the last king of Arnor, who was trapped in ice at sea and was subsequently killed when ice crushed his boat. And then, of course, as I said earlier, there's the examples of the Nazgul and Boromir. The last factor, though, is that mortals always had a difficult time discerning the voice of the divine through nature, like the elves seem to do. Uru himself had tried that with the first men and failed, though I felt he should have known better. And this technique did work with Turgon and Finarfin because, while not being divine themselves, they were immortal and had lived among divine spirits in Valinor. Tuor, again, might be the one exception unless Ulmo guided him to the coast of Beleriand so that he could actually appear to him physically. Because Ulmo had to appear physically to give Tuor his message for Gondolin and tell him where to go. He wasn't going to understand it any other way. In fact, for that matter, every encounter mortals have had with the Valar that made sense to them were all physical encounters, not nuanced or subtle. So in the Third Age, this absolutely would not have been allowed after what happened with Numenor and their addiction to trying to gain immortality because of that physical exposure to the divine. Even the Istari, who were Maiar, were capped in power, memory, and knowledge, as well as being forbidden from just challenging Sauron directly to defeat him. The gods could no longer appear in such a way to re-inspire that same sickness in humans once again. So, therefore, Ulmo can't appear to Gondor or Umbar or the Corsairs like he did in the depths of the ancient First Age. So thus, physical appearances were forbidden, visions severely restricted, and mortals having no framework or reference to recognize a Vala's presence when they're trying to make it known. Ulmo literally could have been everywhere and no one would have known about it. So, yes, I think Ulmo probably still in the waters of Middle-earth if Uru allowed it. His personality, history, and mission all point towards that he was someone who would never abandon the world under any circumstance. But after Numenor, that involvement would have been subtle, indirect, and unrecognized, limited by Uru's new rules. Ulmo didn't disappear. Ulmo simply went quiet. And in a world where the Valar could no longer walk openly, silence might have been the only way that Ulmo could stay. This is the Miller Philosopher. You guys have a good day.